Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process in discussions between the authors, narrators, producers, and post-production teams that bring them all together, as well as guests who have listened to the audiobooks and have questions for the creative teams. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Hi, I'm Becky Parker Geist. I am the host of the Audiobook Connection podcast, Behind the Scenes with the Creative Teams. I'm also president of Bay Area Independent Publishers Association and the CEO and founder of Pro Audio Voices and Amplify Audiobooks, where we provide audiobook and podcasting production, distribution, and marketing. And today I have with me Dr. C. Daniel Miller. He's a freelance copyright specialist and a consultant on business aspects of independent publishing. He helps clients navigate copyright issues in their manuscripts, offering strategies to minimize or eliminate risks when using third-party content. Additionally, he secures permissions for the use of copyrighted materials and oversees large-scale copyright permissions acquisition projects. Dan, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's start off. I know that we're going to talk about copyrights and AI, and we're going to focus on that. But I'd love to just start with the topic of using, before we step into the AI piece, using copyrighted material such as music, potentially sound effects, lyrics in audiobooks, because that is an issue that many people are wondering, well, how do you do that? Is it worth the trouble? How expensive is it? So it just, and we're not going to go in deep, but if you could just give a little overview on the kinds of issues that you see in that realm.
Yeah, you know, from our previous conversations, that always gives me a headache.
I do know, yes. We have tales to tell.
Yeah, because we have done this together.
Yes.
So,
yeah,
I've done quite a few of getting lyrics, because that's the more typical audience that I have for that. And we baby boomers are notorious for wanting to include lyrics in our memoirs. So that's where I hit it most often. And quite honestly, I try to talk people out of it. Now, it's okay to use the title of the song. That could not be copyrighted. So I say, well, just refer to the title of the song and the artist and move on. If they insist, then, okay, we start down a long process. And there was one I had, the name of the song was Simplified. I looked it up, and there were 78 different songs, all with that same title. So I had to find the right one by the right artist at the right time. Part of the problem with lyrics is there are multiple owners. So if you have two songwriters, they own a percentage. And then if they have two music publishers, then you have two more. So that'd be four. The worst one I had was one of the songs by Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody. And anyway, so there were 5 writers and there were 2 publishing companies. Well, the mainline writer passed away, and he left it to 5 people. So now we had 4 of that, 5 of him, and 2. So there were 11 different entities that own pieces of 100%. So tracking all those down is where the real challenge is, and getting somebody to respond. The Semper Fi one, it was only a 10-year-old song, but the guy gone through 4 different agents over that 10-year period. And just trying to find out who owns the rights is a challenge. Now, on the music side, it's a whole different set of licenses for that. And, you know, you're syncing it with the audio and everything else. So there's 2 or 3 different kind of licenses, and you have to find out who owns those pieces and go after permission. The other thing that I'm encountering, both of the lyrics typically will have a minimum. And it's been a couple of years since I did one of those. And it was like $300 for the minimum for the song lyrics. And that $300 is divided up into pieces. So you have to write all those separate checks. Well, for me, each one is a is a line of inquiry. It's just like it's a totally different permission. I did one with you, and it was a funeral dirge from the 1500s, but it was a modern recording. So the original, lapsed into public domain a long time ago. But to get the rights to that, and I think it took me like 4 months to finally get everything signed on the dotted line for you on that one. So they're time consuming, they're expensive, and I'm running into them now where for a recorded piece of music, it's $1,000 minimum. So to use 10 seconds or a minute or whatever the whole thing is, the entry point was $1,000 and could go up from there. So music is particularly difficult, and like I say, I'll try to talk you out of it if you want to use it.
Right.
Or find a source. And that's what you do, is you find a public domain source and you're good to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And is there any, in terms of the lyrics, quoting lyrics or frankly, quoting other text, whether it's poetry or from some other book and you're giving the proper bibliographical citation, what kinds of issues should authors be aware of with those?
If it's copyrighted, there is no minimum amount that you're allowed to use. That's one of the myths that's out there. Now, a publisher can decide how much risk they're willing to take. So they might decide, well, it's 200 words or whatever, but there's nothing in the language of the law that tells you. So if you're using a song lyric, there may only be 30 lines and if you want to use 2 or 3 of them, it gets into the whole area of how substantial is it. If you're doing a poem, if it's a short poem and you read the whole thing, I'm getting poetry and podcasts is one of the things I've been working on recently. And, some of them may be a couple of pages long and some of them are, 12 lines. It doesn't matter if it's copyrighted, it's copyrighted. And fair use is not something that I advocate. And I'll get into that when we start talking about AI. But my view is if it's copyrighted, go get permission. That's not one of the things you want to ask for forgiveness because it can be expensive.
Right.
Forgiveness comes with a price tag.
Right. So those nonfiction texts that have, long lists of citations, bibliographical references, those are all people that need to be reached out to. And
okay, but again, a reference is just saying, I got an idea from here or there. If they got a quote, now academic is one of those areas where fair use does come into play. So if it's a scholarly work, when you're a student, for example, then students use that all the time and they don't have to get permission. If you're the professor and you're writing a textbook on it, however, if you quote it, you need permission if it's under copyright. Mm-hmm. And that's a moving target too, is when is it under copyright? So that's the first challenge for me.
Yeah. Before we move into AI, I just want to circle back to one thing that you'd said earlier where you said just name the title, where, say the title. And when you do that, in an audiobook, right? Or in a book, when you hear that title, especially if it's a song which is when it's going to make the most difference, right? It's going to come to your mind anyway. So it's playing in the mind of the listener, even though it's not physically playing. So I thought that was an excellent comment. So now as we move we're well into the AI world, but there's a lot going on in terms of these questions that authors and lawyers are wrangling with, and our tech people are wrangling with around copyright in this age of AI. So let's dive in there. I'm just going to actually open the floor here and say, where would you like to begin when you start talking with authors about AI? Yeah.
So what I learned, I think I'd already made the correction the time I presented to BAPA on this topic. The first one, the feedback I got said, you need to go back and include more about copyright basics because people didn't have a context. So that's the first thing, is what is copyright and what's it supposed to do? And the bottom line is it's supposed to encourage creativity is the whole line, by giving you exclusive rights. Now that's where AI is really coming to the fore. And this has been a big weekend. I was up at 4 a.m. this morning reading a brand new document that came out of the U.S. Copyright Office. It was part 3 in a 3-part series because I didn't know whether it was something I needed to share with you today. And basically what they're saying is when AI platforms are using copyrighted content to train their models, what's the liability? What are the issues? And essentially, it looks like it's coming down to a fair use question. And that's what Google did 10 years ago when Google copied millions of books without anybody's permission. It went all the way through the Supreme Court, and it was finally judged that was a fair use because the database that Google created was transformative. So that's one of the keys. And this document that I read today, it was 113 pages and had 588 footnotes, if you could imagine.
Wow.
So I read all the footnotes. But anyway, basically what they're saying is the courts are going to decide. So the U.S. Copyright Office did not recommend new legislation dealing with liability for AI platforms for taking everybody's work and copying without permission. So it's going to come down to, is it transformative? Are you interfering with someone's right to earn money off of that? And licensing is the big area. So that's what we're going to see in that coming down the pipe. So I was thinking about your situation. So I know you do a lot of voices. So, you are your own voice talent in there. And I looked up to see what kind of rights those were. So part of it is you could actually trademark your voice for some of these characters that you do, for example. And the other, which is a strange term, is right to privacy. So with that, you could actually license some of your characters or your voices to an AI platform. And then, if you wanted to do that. So that's one of the ways that people are looking at monetizing, putting their copyrighted content on AI platforms. But copyright is extremely complex, and you add AI on top of it. So the thing I'm focused on most is the copyrightability of works that use AI in any way, shape, or form. So after I'd done the presentation with BAPA, I did another one with the Midwest Independent Publishers Association, and that one was recorded. And that was my submission for filing of copyright registration to the PowerPoint presentation and my audio. And I was successful. It is copyrighted. It was registered, including the way I had arranged the AI-generated images on the PowerPoint slides. So I actually got copyright for that process of putting them together, although the AI-generated images are not copyrightable. So that's part of it, is trying to figure out what is and what isn't copyrightable. And you'd have the same issue with yours if you included in an audiobook something that was AI-generated. That piece of that audiobook is actually not included under. It doesn't have copyright protection. But how do you sort that out? That's the other problem. Just like with the book now, how do you sort out what is and what isn't if it uses other people's stuff?
Right. Yeah. Now, of course, my view on AI and in regards to narration is, I'm not going to. I wouldn't do any AI narration because it goes against my.
Yeah, I understand. I just bring it up as an option.
What's right? No, it was a great example. And so I've been in lots of conversations over the last few weeks. I've been at events, author events and such, and it's been and then I've also. So some of those authors are like super excited about how they can just generate all this content based on their previous work. And now they're just like, creating all of this content using AI, again, sort of training on their previous work. And then others, who are terrified with the idea of just everybody taking all their stuff and utilizing it. It's definitely feels like the wild, wild west right now.
Well, I remember when the internet went online in 1994.
Yeah.
Same thing. I've lived through this. So, I actually like change. I use AI all the time. I use it as a research tool. I use it for fact checking. I use it to help me clean up language and all of those kind of things for that. So that's how I see it, and I like change. Now, I see the flip side of that. So if AI is impacting someone's revenue stream, that's another issue. The problem with AI, the way it does, it scraped everything that has been digitized. That's another way to think about it. If you think about everything that exists on the internet is sitting on servers somewhere. So all the blogs that I've done, our website and everything else, the way I think about it is AI kind of runs it through this wood chipper and it breaks it up into little pieces. So my problem is if I have copyrighted stuff that's been taken, how do I find it out there and know that it actually appears in something else? Because it's been broken down into patterns. So that's part of the problem. And our website, I use Perplexity, and I've actually found references to our website when I do queries. So if you think about every website in the world, and then mine shows up in 3 out of 5 statements what I'm looking at there. So I felt pretty good about being found. Had they quoted me, I would not have been so happy, but they did not quote me. So they referenced our website, and that, to me, that was free advertising. So, but if you want to copyright your work, you have to be careful. So you have to disclose what is AI. So what I finally sorted out, and it took me about 5 months to finally get an aha moment, and it's really simple. If it's human generated, then it's potentially copyrightable if it shows enough creativity. If it's AI generated and all you did is put in prompts, it is not copyrightable. And copyright is upholding that steadily. One is going through the courts. He put in over 600 prompts, and the copyright office says, nope, all you're doing is putting in prompts. There's no copyright for that. Now, the problem is there's a huge area in the middle, the gray area, and that's where it's AI assisted. So you mentioned this earlier. So if I write up something and I submit it to an AI platform and ask it to tweak it or whatever else, AI is assisting me with that. And so Grammarly is a good example, or spell checker even. So Grammarly, so the rule is if what the AI platform did, if it were done just that by a human being, if it's copyrightable, then that's too much. So, you could not claim that. But in Grammarly, it's recommending a word substitute. The best way to think of it, and I've created a visual, and basically it's a gradient. So if you think about a gradient that goes from black to white, with white being copyrightable and black is not copyrightable, there's many, many shades of gray in the middle, and that's where it gets difficult. And if you file for an application, you have to sort that out with the examiner so that he or she will know what you actually did. And that's what I had to go through in getting my PowerPoint actually registered.
Well, let's take a short pause, and we'll be right back. Would you like to earn more from your audiobook sales? If you're an author with an audiobook, you may have noticed that royalties from Audible especially, and other platforms as well, are frankly kinda pathetically low, disappointingly low, and unfairly low considering what it cost you in effort and resources to create it. How is it the retailers are the ones making all the money off your work and investment? As someone who started in the audiobook industry in 1981, I've found it frustrating that authors keep getting shortchanged. The good news is that Pro Audio Voices just launched Amplify Audiobooks, a direct sale audiobook platform for authors that puts you back in the driver's seat. Earn 65% of the gross sales price that you set. Compare that to the percentage of the percentage that retailers give. Run promotions on schedule whenever you want. Create coupon codes. Build community with your customers, since you'll know who they are and how to contact them. Work with a caring, responsive, supportive team to help you succeed all along the way. Get help with marketing. Get paid weekly. We're helping audiobook authors who are frustrated by painfully low royalties and the barriers that prevent them from managing their own products and customers. Amplify Audiobooks is a direct sale platform that enables authors to earn much higher royalties and have way more control. We're disrupting the audiobook industry by putting authors first. Get started today at proaudiovoices.app or Go to proaudiovoices.com and click on the Distribution Amplify link. Join the movement. So, when I think back to the early days when, back in Shakespeare and, Chaucer, and one of the things that was standard was people they would create different takes on the same story, right? And that was considered a way of honoring, in part, a way of honoring the storyteller before, right? But creating. So it's such a different, and as you had stated as well that the copyright, the whole idea behind copyright is to encourage creativity. This feels like such an interesting time, especially with those couple points of historical context. It's like, and I'm not sure even what the question is that follows up on that, but I guess I would love your thoughts on, do you think at this point that AI is actually assisting in terms of our real creativity? Because I know people who just, go, oh my gosh, I can be a writer. I just plug in these prompts and boom, it writes something for me and it's great. I love it. And I'm like, I'm becoming an author. And I think, no, you're not becoming an author. You're learning how to stick prompts and getting responses you like. What are your thoughts?
I have a simple phrase. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tomato named Tommy, who comes of age. So I plugged that in, it's going to be nice and short. I did this multiple times. And every time I did that, the tomato got eaten. It was his fun. So I've traumatized every child in the world. I'll never eat a vegetable now. But so that's part of the whole idea of creativity is something that very much can and already has started suffering. So Amazon, for example, requires, when you put in KDP, they require disclosure if you use AI-generated content. They require it. Now, they're not flagging it publicly yet, but I think that's just a matter of time where they put some banner or something on there that said, this was AI generated in some way, shape, or form. You do not have to disclose it, if it's AI assisted. So if you use it to help you, Grammarly and those kind of things, to tweak it, look for plot lines and help develop characters and all of those kind of things, you don't have to disclose it. So Amazon is going to be one of the portals, I think, for disclosing that. So the other thing I've been playing around with is badging. And
you want to define that for us? Badging?
Authors Guild. So the Authors Guild is one of the ones that sued Google back in 2015 to get all the way to the Supreme Court. They've already sued the OpenAI and Microsoft. So they're suing them for the whole AI use of other people's stuff without compensation or permission for that. But so Authors Guild has a human authored badge certification program now. So if you go through a certain thing, then you can actually get a badge, just like getting an awards badge on the front of your book that says this was human generated. So I think that's a step in the right direction. So what I've done, I've created 3 badges. So one is human authored, one is AI generated, and the other is AI assisted. And my graphics actually form so with red being AI generated, yellow being AI assisted, and green being human authored. So some way to let the audience know how much involvement there was as part of the transparency. So that's what I'm trying to do. And in my PowerPoint slides that you see up here, I label any time that I used either AI generated or AI assisted. So that's very much what I talk about when I go through the presentation. So the presentation itself is an example of how to use AI and how to disclose it. And so if people are going to use it, they need to plan ahead and keep track of how they've used it and everything else. So
yeah, what do you find is because I know you meet with lots of authors and do a lot of presenting as well. What's like the most common question that you get asked in this?
Believe it or not, it's fair use. I can use 300 words, right? No. Or the author, he'll have multiple quotes in there, and none of them add up to 300 words or whatever. And I don't. The question is, do I need to get permission? And the answer is yes. You need to get permission for that. So no matter how many times I make a presentation, it comes up. Now, what's happening when I'm doing these new presentations? I'd warn the audience up front. You're going to have more questions when I'm finished than when I started. Because the problem with, first of all, you have to understand copyright. And I understood copyright really well before I got into this whole thing about AI. And it still took me months to sort it all out because there's hundreds of pages from the U.S. Copyright Office. And how do you glean it down to the essence of it?
You put it in AI and ask them for the essence of it, right?
I do that. I ask AI about AI constantly. For that. So I've asked them if they lie. I've asked them if, do you reproduce anything? And I found one this morning, this new report out of the Copyright Office. It's the RAG principle that's in there. And what it is AI is, they bring all this stuff into the database, but they will also go out and do a query just like you're doing a Google search, and they'll find current new stuff, and they may present that to you. So when they say they don't give you any copyright content, that's not true. Because my initial filing to the Copyright Office, the examiner said that looks like a photograph. And that bothered me. So I went back and looked, and sure enough, Perplexity had actually pulled photographs from websites and put that into the finding back to me. And I'd included that in one of my slides. So I had to go back in and take all that out because I would be copyright infringing if I had used those images. So I had to black them out. But I have that as part of what I'm talking about. So you have to be very careful that you're not inadvertently infringing someone else's copyrights.
Right. It seems it's a little bit like we've been presented with this new set of many bladed knives, that we if we don't learn how to use them safely and carefully, we are going to get ourselves hurt.
Yes. Yeah. Like I say, it's a tool that can be used or abused. And the downside, if you infringe somebody else, they're not going to, you put their stuff in your book. Doesn't matter whether you found it on Perplexity or ChatGPT or something else. You still infringe their rights, no matter how you got it. So,
right. It almost makes it easier to accidentally violate someone else's rights.
Yes. So part of what I do is I'll use Perplexity, and what it does, it gives me the sources. I'll go to the source. So what it's doing, it's helping me find sources. And then I go to that original source then and verify. So the other little phrase is it's coming out of Reagan: trust but verify. So you need to verify the content and then where the content is coming from for that. So you should always do that. And one of the nice things about some of these, they actually will keep a library for you. So I can go back and look at my previous prompts and go back and actually find sources. I've had to do that. So they help with some of the record keeping on what all's involved in that. But but it's a new world out there.
Yeah, it's wild, scary.
It is.
So much of the world is scary right now.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you use Perplexity. Is that the only AI platform you use?
No, that's my go-to platform. In the old days, I used to Google everything. So now I use Perplexity. And Google actually, when you do a Google search anymore, often you will actually get Google's AI results.
AI overview.
And they give you the sources and all of those kind of things too. So I might use Google, Perplexity, and ChatGPT on the same topic. And they'll give me different answers and different sources. So, it's when I'm looking for things, like particularly when I'm trying to track down a rights holder on a work. I use that a lot to try to find contact information for authors or the heirs of authors, which is even harder. So I use it in the copyright detective work, like you see above my head.
Yes.
So it's a good tool for me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is there something about Perplexity in particular that you have found as more attractive than the other tools?
It's more of a research tool. You cannot create images with it. it might give you some images back, but it will not create it, or Chat GPT. So it's just one that I got comfortable with. I started out with Chat GPT, and I didn't like it because the free version I had never gave you a source. So that always bothered me. I didn't know where it was coming from. There are others. The parent of the Perplexity. I'm losing it. There's so many AI platforms out there now, but I've gotten into Canva when I'm looking at some image generation and other. So there's 4 or 5 that I use kind of regularly. As I have other needs, I'll look into other platforms because they're specialized. Like if you're dealing with music, there are certain ones that just deal with music. There are certain ones that just deal with image creation and all that. There's some that are more for research, hardcore research and those kind of things. So it's finding the right tool in your tool chest. So it's finding the right one. And so far, that's done what I need, especially since I compare, the 3 different ones that give me, text generation, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that from having heard you speak, on this topic, I know that what you're mentioning about going and checking the sources is a really important step.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's a lot of misinformation that is picked up as if it's just as true as anything else.
It's called a hallucination. So AI hallucinations are real. It sounds feasible, but it's not. So it makes stuff up. It's like with images. A lot of times, if you create an image that's a character, make sure they only have 5 fingers and toes on each, or only 2 arms. Because I've gotten them with extra arms and extra fingers, and the text is wrong. So it's still not there. It's getting better, but it still makes a lot of just dumb mistakes because it's a machine. Right. Not a human driving. You just prompt it.
Right.
And
it's that information chipper, as you described, right?
Yeah, the wood chipper.
Throwing it all together and not really noticing when it doesn't come together in a way that makes sense to us humans.
Yeah. If you want to dig that into it, that new Part 3 that just came out of the U.S. Copyright Office for that, it's heavy reading for that because it gets in and explains. It kind of takes the thing apart when it looks at fair use and how it actually trains and what it actually does and how it codes the information and all of those kind of things. So if you want to dig deeper into how the thing works, that Part 3, but be prepared for a long, heavy read.
Yeah. Would you? I'm not sure all of our listeners will be familiar with the term fair use. Would you like to define what that is meant by that?
You're going to make me pull up a PowerPoint slide here, and you know what? I was ready for you.
All right. As long as some of our listeners are just listeners, so just make sure you include.
So what it is fair use is actually defense. So if I use your stuff and you take me to court, then I may claim fair use or whatever. It's only so many words, blah, 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 blah. A judge is actually going to decide whether it's fair use or not. So that's the key. So it's not a right that anyone is given. So the first thing, and this is what happened to Google, and this is exactly what's happening to AI right now. The last time I counted, there are 39 court cases right now against AI platforms that are active in federal courts. So the first one is the purpose and the character of the work, and that's where you get into transformative. So how is what you produce, what's its nature? So in Google's case, they had scanned all these books, but it was a searchable database, and they restricted your access to it. So it only gave you little snippets. You couldn't read the whole book off of Google. So it was controlling how much access you were getting. You could find phrases in there, but they limited it. So that's exactly what's happening now with AI, is this whole thing about, is the end result transformative? So that's the acid test in this. So the second thing is the nature of the copyrighted work. So if you have a short poem and somebody uses, 3 lines and only had 6 to begin with, you've used half of the work. So it gets into what's the nature of it. Song lyrics, they're short. It's not a 1,000-page novel. It's a short work. Right. So how much of that did you use? And that's the third one, is the amount and the substantiality of what you actually used. So how much of the other person's thing did you actually use in there? And the last one is, and that's where people who are hit in the bank account by AI, it's the effect on the market. So if you replicate what I did and you sell it on Amazon, now you're taking away from my customers. So that's one part of it, is how much impact do you have? And the second one is this lost licensing opportunity. So licensing is a way a lot of this is headed, and a lot of AI platforms actually license the content. So they get permission and they compensate people up front for what that is. They don't just go out and scrape it off the internet and then use what they will, if you will. So that's the fourth piece of that, is the effect on the market. And what the U.S. Copyright Office said in this document that just came out this weekend is a lot of the cases, the AI platform will be found to be transformative. And therefore, what they have done is fair use. Some of them. And some of them are not going to be found. So there's one that's already made it through. Reuters sued a company, and I can't remember here we go. It's Ross Intelligence. It happened to be on the same slide. Ross Intelligence was an AI platform. What they did is they went in and they scraped all of Reuters' news feeds. So only Reuters. And they were trying to create an alternative news service using Reuters' own stuff.
Wow, that sounds pretty dark and bad.
Well, they lost. And then they could. And so what happened is all the court cases bankrupted the startup. So Ross went out of business 2 years before the courts finally made any decisions on all this kind of stuff. So that's an example where it was not fair use. It was an unfair competition they were trying to set up, especially using only their stuff to begin with.
Right.
So
yeah,
we're going to have the two extremes where a platform is going to be ruled against, and that says it's not fair use, and there's some that it is. And there's going to be a lot in the gray area in the middle where they may say under certain circumstances, this is fair, and in certain circumstances is not fair use. So their bottom line, and I pulled it right out of the document, I've got it on the slide now, it said, not every transformative use is a fair one. So that's the thing. So that's the way the courts. So the Copyright Office is leaving it to the courts, and that's where I thought it was before this new document came out. So the Supreme Court is going to ultimately make the decisions, or they will not overturn a lower court that has made a decision. So I'll be following the court cases, and like I say, the 39 that are queued up already.
Yeah, great. Well, if you would, we're running out of our allotted time here. If you would share with our listeners how they can keep up with you and what you're up to, share your website, that would be great.
Well, let's see. Did I put it on top of my slide? Well, that's simple. Just put it, thecopyrightdetective.com. That's how you can find it. Well,
there you go.
And
all right, great. Thecopyrightdetective.com. Yeah, super.
You can find me there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been very informative, and I know this topic is huge. So it'd be great to have you come back, in several months and update us.
Look, I've already changed about 50% of the slides that you saw. More than half of them have already been updated with new stuff.
Yeah. No, I believe it. It's moving so fast. It is it's like chasing a speeding car.
It is. Yep. All right.
But thank you for being, on it and paying attention so that all of us can benefit from the gleaned knowledge that you have gained. So
you're quite welcome.
Dan, thank you very much for being with me.
See you later. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.